Now in this lesson we're going to talk about what we can eliminate in a photograph, what we don't need, and when we eliminate it, how does it help the painting. And the first thing I want to go over is when we take photographs. With digital you have the option of putting it in the computer and adjusting the brightness, contrast. If you don't have Photoshop, you can download, it's a free download, it's called GIMP, G-I-M-P, so it'd be www.gimp.com. And you download it on your computer, bring it up, put photographs in it, and you can do the same thing. You can adjust the brightness, lightness, darkness, contrast, and a few other things. That's basically all I do. I put my photograph in Photoshop and I just go to brightness and contrast. I don't mess with the color on Photoshop unless I'm going to go into the painting aspect of it and change the color that way. Then I can make this darker, and you can see in the photograph that's a lot better than that. It's too washed out. All these values are too light. Darks are probably a little too light, and the lights are really too light. But the minute I just make the brightness darker, it pops things. There's more color. Then I can push more contrast, and that pushes the difference between the dark and light. Sometimes I have to reduce the contrast. If there's too many strong darks, I can lighten those darks a little bit by just reducing the contrast. But this is real helpful. It's very simple. Just put in Photoshop and just do that. And I do that to all the photographs. Most of the time they're too light, and I have to darken them slightly to bring some of the color out. Once in a while they're too dark, and I have to reduce the contrast. So that being said, this is better value relationships. More color in the lights now. Darks are a little bit darker. Now I want to decide how to change it. And you have to think first why you took the photograph. What do you think the focal point was or is, or what draws you to that photograph? In my case here, what drew me to take this photograph? So my focal point, and it's usually not just an object, it's usually an area. And I like these aspens in here. It's summertime and everything's green. I can push these aspens a bit lighter, maybe even a bit more yellower, doesn't matter. To me, color-wise, changing it is the value that matters. A little bit of the sky. I like these trees. It's very interesting with the lighter trunks against the dark background. And then some of the water in here. But this has the most contrast in it in this area, and also the variation of color in the white trunks. So that's my focal point. So once I determine that, everything else is up for grabs. Everything else is peripheral. So first thing I want to get rid of is this bush. That's a strong vertical. It takes up 1/6 of the painting. It's a big unnecessary shape. So I'm going to get rid of that. And what I would do is just continue this bank on down. And just pull that over, pull the water over. And all I'll be doing is copying a couple of these values, picking a couple of the values and colors in the water and just making it bigger, pulling it out more. Then also, all this stuff in here, tall grasses, tall shrubbery. Here, kind of tall grass, tall shrubbery. The values kind of blend together. And again, everything is kind of upright. So what I want to do is eliminate some of that. First thing I'll do is decide I want to lay some of this flat. So I'm just going to use these kind of horizontal lines that kind of follow the form a little bit. All this I'll make a lot flatter. Brush strokes will be more horizontal or following the slant, just like it follows it in here. And I want to cut down on some of this shrubbery and tall grass. So I'm eliminating some of that shrubbery, just filling in with this value, this hillside up here, putting it down there. Same thing in here. And the same thing in here. I want a more interesting, kind of organic looking shape, and I'm going to flatten out all these areas. And that's going to create more contrast because I'm going to make these vertical shrubbery, tall grasses. They're vertical, they're not flat. They're a different plane. Make them darker, and I'm going to lighten up on these flatter areas. And this is a simple thing. I'm not completely changing things to make things totally different. I'm just flattening out some of these more upright planes in the grass area. So what that would look like, and well, a couple of other changes too. These trees here in the background, maybe these back in here. And back in here, I might have some of it shows through in there. Push them a lot bluer to make them go back. So what that looks like real quickly, I want to get a bit more of just a bluish green. And the computer's kind of helpful in this, and Photoshop, or again, GIMP. The minute I push these, and it doesn't have to be quite this blue, but this is effective. You don't have to sneak up on them. It doesn't have to be a real subtle change at first. Blast that in there, because right away, that gives me instant distance. Then if I want a lighter yellow-green, and I'm looking at here on these lighter planes, I want the equivalent on the palette of white, cad yellow, orange. That gives me a yellow-orange. And yellow-orange mixed with blue gives me kind of a muted yellow-green, because the orange kind of mutes it. And I will, of course, get the right value and make this more opaque. In other words, I'd be painting it a lot thicker. And let me get it a little more of an orange in with that yellow. That's a little better. Now I can vary the color, but if I get it in here first as a larger shape, then I might add a bit more orange to it. Or I could add a little bit of red. Just want to change up the color a little bit. I'm not thinking, gee, what color is going to work perfectly here. I know it's going to be light. I know it's going to be more on the yellow-orange side of green. So don't hesitate to push things. Now let's get a bit more greener, just for the sake of variety. It's a bit too strong, so I'll gray it down. And I like that dirt patch that's up there, or kind of dried out dead grass, whatever it is. And again, I'm not matching the photograph. Photograph's a little too light. But all I'm thinking about here is that these are lighter, either flatter or slanted. Then on the verticals, I want to go darker. I mean, they're still sunlit, and these are real quick changes. Get some dark accents under there. Then I can pull that color of the water, which, you know, there's a lot of orange in there, so I would start with orange and then gradually add blue to blue-violet to it. And that's how this is like a little better value than what's in the photograph. And then just pull this on over. And I can do this real roughly in Photoshop or in a small little color sketch. Get a piece of canvas, or I generally get a bigger canvas board. I've got a 16 by 20. And I have mapped out on there about 6 or 8 little 5 by 7, sometimes just 3 by 5 inch little squares. And I use those to do little color studies, where I'm just filling in the big planes and trying to eliminate some things and maybe change up colors just a little bit. But that gives me a different view from that. It gets rid of some of the clutter, especially in these I'm flattening out a lot of these areas to create some more value change in the foreground. And again, these colors, that's a little better view of that. But that gives me a bit more interest than that, because I'm creating more flat plane, darkening some of the verticals, getting rid of the big upright. So creating more flat plane, which always gives you more contrast and a little cooler as it goes back.